Scotty, the crystals are about to burn. And they'll immediately go, are you making fun of me? And I go, he speaks. See, I'm not answering them. I'm talking about what they're doing. And I'm going, he wonders. He's not ready to go into a trance yet, but soon. I think he will. What do you think? And they'll go, well, I don't want to use any hypnosis. I go, he won't use hypnosis. He'll just go into a trance without it. Because when I talk about him, rather than talking to you, it's a whole different thing. It's another form of communication. When I mix the levels of my communication and I look at you and I say, okay, now, he doesn't know what's going to happen, but he does. See, it begins to separate things. You begin to create concepts inside of people. Since there are so many already, it's easy to create new ones. And if you aim them towards success, it's really very easy to get people to turn the corner. Now, the technique that I just used with him dates back really a long time ago. I did this with a client, and actually, I did not realize that this was a hypnotic induction. I didn't know hypnosis yet. I did this years ago, and I did it because a guy kept saying to me, he kept going like this. He goes, well, he said, you know, on one hand, I look at myself as being really fucked up and screwed up with nothing but problems. And on the other hand, I see a lot of potential in myself. And I kept going like this. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, you know, he said, if I could just reach out to this, you know, and put some of this together, you know, he said, then I wouldn't feel like such an idiot all the time, and like my life is nothing, and like I'm just miserable, and like I'm doomed. And I said, like that, and I said, okay. I said, now, see yourself being doomed. Hold yourself out here. And I said, and then see all these things you really want. I said, you see this one? Now look at that one. And I said, now take these things, and I want you to slowly pull them together until they merge into one thing. Now, as a hypnotist, I realize that when you do that, you get full-arm catalepsy. It becomes, well, look at, you're having people hallucinate. Tell me it's not a deep trance phenomenon. There is no one in your hand. It's easier than the chair. You can carry it around with you. But you see, what we're talking about is not something that stops at hallucinating. And I don't ask you to beat up anyone in your hand either. I find that that's not profoundly useful, although it's a lot easier because they're smaller. You guys are too easy. Now, what was that problem? I'm sorry. Let me get back to that. Because when you begin to meld things together that don't normally fit, what happens is you do that inside your imagination. What happens is you now begin to make a new set of ideas. Because what happens when you think about it now? Does the future seem like it's going to be different? I'll accept that answer. Well, see, if you haven't got the old timeline, you can't compare it. That's the nice thing. When you begin to make it so the past seems implausible. See, to me, this is why I've always told people, from the beginning. One of the best things about the work I've done is that I give people a way of testing it. If people can think about things and it bothers them, and then you make them think about it and they can't make it bother them. This is what I like. I love taking phobics, and when you go through and you have them spin their phobic feeling and they get freaked out, and then you'd have them pull it out, turn it upside down and pull it back in and spin it the other way around. And then you tell them, okay, now think about an elevator and be afraid. And they go. Now the funny part is they'll try. I find this to be humorous. I go, go ahead. Think about what used to make you feel bad. Can you make it feel bad now? Now, it is. It's funny, though, isn't it? I mean, and the funny part is the more you try, the more you can't do it. Right? Now, this is for the first time in the, quote, history of psychiatry, psychology, or any personal change thing that people really have looked at the obvious way to test your work. I mean, to me, I'm always going to want to take them to an elevator in the end. But you see, what this does, this very act that I did with him, convinces people so that when they do get in the real world, they have the courage, they have the stamina, and they have the sense of direction. Because it's not enough to change people. You have to also convince them they're changed. Now, I used to do, I know this for a fact, because I used to work with people, and I would get them through their fears. They would tell me they're not afraid. They wouldn't. And then they would come back 2-3 weeks later, or I'd see them a year later, and I'd say, so you're not afraid of elevators? They go, no, not at all. And I go, have you been up in elevators? And they go, no. And I'd go, well, if you're not afraid, how come you don't go up in elevators? And they go, well, I'm not taking any chances. And that's not a good thing. Because, you see, to me, they should get right out there and try it. I insist upon it. I take couples, when I work with couples, I have them actually try and fight after I'm done. I bring up all the things that they started with to try and make them fight about it. And if they don't laugh at each other just like him, I know I've done the wrong thing. Because my job is to make it so you diffuse the violence, not add to it. And to me, it's not that hard to do. I just have them think of why they got married in the first place. Because it's not all the bad things couples need to think about. What they need to think about is that they've decided that they want to spend their life with this person. They didn't decide, gee, this is the person I would like to humiliate and scream at for the next 30 years. That's not what the decision was made on. They made the decision based on the fact that they wanted to have better and better feelings. So if they go back and think about their hopes and think about their dreams, and I have them go back and remember that there was a point in their life where they thought they'd rather spend every moment with this person than do anything else on the earth. And I anchor it. And then I tell them, now, you said that you go absolutely nuts when this guy doesn't make the bed. And I go, now think about the bed being unmade. Fire the anchor off. Because the soon as you take those good, strong feelings, suddenly it makes it so fucking unimportant, all this little stuff. The stuff that people fight about. Couples arguing is nothing but a bad habit. You don't have to do it. There is nothing important enough to hurt each other over. And if you find yourself doing it, if you can't start laughing at it, it gets out of control. It becomes a habit that builds and builds and drives people to get apart that shouldn't be apart. Now, sometimes you marry the wrong person. It happens. I know I did it once. You know, I married somebody because they looked really good. I should have listened to them. Because once I started, it scared the crap out of me. But I was only married for 2 months. Then I went out for a pack of cigarettes, and I didn't see him for a few years. You know, it wasn't the right thing. If you find somebody, you have to find somebody who likes you for who you are. A lot of people pretend to be somebody other than they are when they meet people. That's not the way to be. You want to find somebody who likes you, not somebody who likes someone you're not. That doesn't make any sense. And you'll discover it's a lot easier that way. That it's important that people feel at home in themselves and in home in the new feelings that they get. But anyway, I wanted you to go back with your partner because I want you to add this extra piece in. Go back and get the same person. Now remember, same things, rules apply. Even though it's the second part to the same piece of work, I want you to go back, only this time you do the same thing. Say, okay, in a moment, what I'm going to do is ask you to relax. Only this time we're going to do our trances eyes open. Because what I want you to do is to hold out your hand, and I want you to begin to see yourself. Now, some people visualize better than others. Don't let this worry you. Because as long as they know what it feels like and what it sounds like and where they're stuck, they can spatially anchor it. Because that's all this is an anchor. So that when they go like that, they think about the limitations. And they go over here, have them think about the hopes and the dreams. And if all of these bad feelings, 70,000 bad feelings are going to be gone, this opens up a tremendous amount of time. And when you start calculating it in terms of the actual number of hours that people spend feeling bad in the course of a day. I mean, maybe not you guys, but I know lots and lots of people spend actually more time feeling bad in the course of a day than feeling good. And that's absolutely a bad deal. It's not a good deal at all. And just think if you were to switch that around so that you spent almost all of the day feeling good and better and only felt bad now and then because there's some prick in the restaurant who won't bring you your food in a reasonable amount of time. I don't know how many of you ate downstairs, but I was about ready to kill this guy. I don't think it should take an hour and 45 minutes to have lunch, for heaven's sakes. Just I ordered cheesecake. It took them 40 minutes to bring the cheesecake. What is it? Was it the angle of the cut and measuring it that was the problem? Well, let's see. We need a perfect wedge. It must be exactly 32.1 degrees. And we have to hire a scientist. The hard part was not cutting the cake. The hard part was getting the lasers to measure it. You know, it was ridiculous. I finally said to the guy, I said, look, I don't care about the cheesecake. Just bring me my bill. I got to get the hell out of here. So they went and got the cheesecake. And I thought, oh, guy, this got word. So I finally said to him, I said, please don't bring me my bill right now. And the guy went and got my bill. And I thought, this works pretty good. This guy's so unconscious, he doesn't process negation consciously or unconsciously. You know, if I said to this guy, don't think about blue, right? He would say, blue what? There's no hypnosis, is there? No trance. Remember, there's a no trance. K-N-O-W, trance. K-N-O-W, trance. I know the ambiguity may not translate, but it does in English. It does? Oh, that's nice. In English, it does. Translates into English perfectly. God, Stephen, I would have never known that. You're so much help. Oh, yeah. Well, just think like in Russian, you can't say no, you have to say yet. That sounds so, you know. I like W words, like now, you know. That to me is, you know, words that end in O and W, where you can hang them out and you say now. See, in German, it ends in a T. It's no fun at all. It's just not the same. But, you know, the thing is you don't have to speak just one language. You can speak more than one language. It's okay. I do it all the time. I use words that don't even exist, like neuro-linguistic programming. I love the first time I ever said that to somebody. Somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I looked down on the floor of my car, and there was a neurology book. Right, there was a programming manual for PDP 1134A, you know, and a neurology book, and I went, neuro-linguistic programming. Looked at him and I went, I'm a neuro-linguistic programmer. And the guy went, wow. You know, he said, that must be really rewarding. And I went, oh yeah. Can I go now? So I got a sign, and it said Nervo-linguistic programming. And that's what it said on my door for years, Nervo-linguistic programming, because the guy misread my handwriting and didn't put neuro. He put nervo. So, you know, just think you could all be Nervo-linguistic programmers if I'd have left it on the book. I don't know if any of you have a copy of Neuro-linguistic Programming, the English edition. There's a misspelling in it, and I've never corrected it because I think it's funny. After page 90, it says on every page of the book Neurolinguistic Programming, Volume 1, Neurolinguistic Programming, instead of neurolinguistic. They got a Q mixed up with the G. The typesetter did it, but I found it in the galleys, but I thought it was cute, so I left it. I'm not a perfectionist by any means. I like stuff like that. Structure of Magic, Volume 1 in English. They screwed up, and the thing that says presuppositions, they mixed up the sentence with what the presupposition. They got them backwards. And in 23 years, I've never corrected it. I do that just to see if anybody will say anything. You know, only 2 people have mentioned it. In all these years, we sold over 300,000 copies of that book. And only 2 people have ever wrote. One of them taught grammar at a Catholic college. It figures, huh? You know, and the other was one of my students, and who had said, you think I should read The Structure of Magic? Because he'd studied with me, he already knew the meta model. And I said, yeah, it wouldn't hurt to read it. I said, it won't take that long. And he sat down and he was reading it in the corner. He walked over and he said, you know, this is backwards. And I said, really? I said, I knew that. And he said, well, how come you didn't correct it? And I said, I was just left it for you. So I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to take 10 minutes apiece and, you know, sit down, go back with your partner. Now, here's the way it goes. Remember, you have to do all the same pieces. You get them set up, only this time sit across from them. And before you, as you talk about the thing, make sure that you do it so that you tell them to hold out their hands first. And then you say, in a moment, I'm going to tell you to do this. And I'm going to tell you to do this. So that as you describe it, and you do it, look at their hand. And look at this hand. And as you go back and forth, alter your state. So that in essence, you do it before it's done. So that you say, on this hand, you can begin to think about the limitations that you have, where you feel stuck, the places you haven't gone. And if those are disappearing, what are you going to do with all the time? How are you going to do? What new options is it going to open? How are you going to see yourself being freer and easier and having all these new choices? And then go back and forth between one and the other, and then tell them to hold up their hands and start to do it themselves. But at the same token, you still make sure you induce the altered state by inducing it yourself, so that when you look at them, they start to go, sleep, sleep. These poor guys in the front row. The deepest trance they went into is when that guy was speaking German, though. There's nothing like listening to something that sense makes inside of language, you know. That's when you tell people, you go, trance, go deeper now. Sleeping still, thoughts changing. Now you can feel something which will and can. Relax. There you go. Relax. That's right. You can keep your eyes open. You know you can go into a profound altered state with your eyes open. It's really pretty easy. I do it all the time. It makes the world so much more interesting, because you begin to notice the changing focus of your eyes. Sometimes it takes on a purple hue all around things. Sometimes you begin to see colors. Sometimes you begin to focus through things, and things look a little blurrier. But then other things look a little clearer, like your future. Because if you begin to think about your future changing, now, that's right, suddenly new things will begin to happen. So close your eyes, that's right, and let them happen. And with a growing sense of comfort and anticipation about just what it is that you're about to do, I want you to begin to bring together these two new ideas. So the idea that you don't need to feel bad in the old way, and that you can begin to have lots and lots of time to have new feelings that you can use in lots of ways inside your future, changing now. Because the future is always moving into the past now. That's right. So I tell you what, I want you guys to open your eyes. That's right. Write that down. Open your eyes. Trying to take notes. I'm not an easy person to notes take of. Language translating easy not necessarily, because normal English speak I not that normally anyway. Stephen relaxing, cells exploding. So, okay, 10 minutes apiece. Go back with your partner. Do the next piece of the installation. So how'd you guys do? Pretty easy? You guys feel better? Guys look really fucking tranced, man. I was just saying to myself, I'm glad this isn't a week-long workshop. We'd have to scoop you guys up with a shovel. Put you in envelopes and mail you home, and you'd come out as a fine white powder. What? Now I don't know what to say. I lost my train of thought. Who am I? Who are you people? The cable looks good, but I don't know what the hell I'm talking about anymore. Anyway, see, the purpose is, if I can kind of back up here a little bit, because, you see, when we started out the first day, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted you guys to start out by realizing that just by deliberately manipulating your feelings, you could change. Because a lot of people think that you have to do things. A lot of people have told me in NLP, they go, well, I don't make good enough pictures to change. And it's not really, it's not a matter of the quality of your images. If bad images make you feel bad, then bad images can make you feel good. It's that simple. If you see images outside of consciousness and they make you feel bad, then you can seek images outside of consciousness and they can make you feel good. But ultimately, the thing that's the driving force, the thing that makes you so you feel compelled to do things, whether they're good things or bad things, it's obviously your feelings by definition. That, you know, it's not that people make feelings and don't have, make pictures and don't have any feelings, and they end up stuck, because otherwise, you know, these mechanisms wouldn't control us. But literally, there's an overlap on the cortex. There's a 40% overlap between the auditory cortex and the kinesthetic cortex. That's why sounds make us feel things. That's why it's a real different thing than when somebody says, clean your room, as opposed to somebody who says, clean your room. Those, your kinesthetics are going to feel different. And so especially when you talk to yourself, it becomes vitally important that you begin to realize that the way in which you sound to yourself, the images, by the way, that you make also overlap with the kinesthetic cortex by about 30%. So you actually, when you see things, you are feeling them. When you hear things, you are feeling them. But the same thing is true that if you begin to change the way you feel, it alters your visual and auditory perceptions. One of the reasons that I'm able to see a lot of things first before other people is that I start by changing the way I feel first. When people told me, they said, oh, it's impossible to hypnotize schizophrenics. See, I'm kind of a polarity responder. The first time I heard people say that, I went, you can't hypnotize schizophrenics. And I thought, well, they're human beings. Not only are they human beings, they're hallucinating already. That the first schizophrenic that I worked with hallucinated dead babies on hot dogs floating across the room. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that seems like they're in a pretty good trance already. And I mean, literally, I went with Virginia. I really knew very little about schizophrenics. I'd read something, a couple of books about schizophrenia because I worked at a publishing house that published them. But I never really thought about having a career with schizophrenics. I never thought that much about it. And when I went with Virginia to the mental hospital, Virginia did this thing. And at one point, she leaned over and she said, Richard, she said, I'm having trouble telling the staff from the patients. And I went, there are patients here? I didn't even know. And she said, oh, yeah. She said, but you don't have to worry. The acutely schizophrenics aren't in this ward. And I said, well, who are these people? And then I began to notice the easiest way to tell them apart is the people who were just in mental hospital didn't have zippers and buttons because they washed their clothes in industrial washing machines, and it ripped the zippers out and busted the buttons off. And that was about the only real serious way I could tell, because if we based it on the loony things they said from my point of view. But see, I wasn't a psychologist. I didn't know any better. And at that point in time, I said, I'd like to see some of the real schizophrenics if these people aren't. I said, because I'd heard that schizophrenics were crazier than other people. And I have to admit, I was pretty disappointed that for the most part, they didn't seem any crazier than the people that were on the street I grew up on. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were people talking to themselves all the time. There were winos with the bottle sitting around going, that fucking son of a bitch. And we knew they were crazy, but we didn't think anything about them. They didn't bother us. We didn't lock them up. Every once in a while, they'd fall down and break their bottles. So you'd give them 50 cents and they'd go buy another one and not bother you. It seems to me better than putting somebody in jail. And we knew that there were people that heard voices, but we didn't think anything about it. They'd always heard voices. But when I went in, and we sat down, and there was a day room, and there were a bunch of people running around in it. And the psychiatrist he brought John Grinder in at the same time, and we went in and we looked around, and and John looked at me and he said, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, let's find out, and as we took a couple of steps, this guy came up to us and he went like this. And he said, "Did you guys just see a dead baby fly by on a hot dog?" And I went, "Yes." And the guy looked at me like this. He went, "Well, really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I can do that." And I can. You know, I mean, I grew up in the 60s. I can hallucinate just about anything, you know. I used to go to Golden Gate Park every Sunday afternoon, and we used to play music for, I don't know, 20 hours straight, and we played it so loud that, when we go back, our ears would just be going, and they used to take overhead projectors and shine liquid goop on it and make it so it was all psychedelic, and your eyes were burned out, and strobe lights and all of this stuff. And I mean, in those days, the police didn't care. They didn't think anything about it. The police were the ones setting our equipment up. And they even supplied the drugs in those days. I mean, it was here. You guys want to smoke a joint? And we'd go, no, we're too busy playing. The cops would go, well, if you want a joint, just let me know, So we took plenty away from these other people. They did, they didn't care. It was San Francisco, 1966. LSD wasn't even illegal. I mean, everybody was taking acid in those days. But we didn't think of this as being a bad thing. Hallucinating wasn't necessarily bad. But yet, the same moment this guy said this, the psychiatrist that was with us stiffened up like a board. He went like this. And he looked at this guy and he said, now. He said, Peter, we've talked about this before. There are no dead babies. And I looked at him and I went, there aren't? And he said, no. He said, that's totally ridiculous. A dead baby's floating on hot dogs. And Peter looked at me like, and I looked at Peter and I said, Peter, I said, why did you ask me about it? And Peter went, what? And I said, if you see a dead baby on a hot dog flying by, I said, that's the one thing. I said, but you came and asked me. I said, why did you ask me about the dead baby on the hot dog? And Peter looked at me and he said, because I wanted to know if it was real. Now, that seems to me not stupid. That seems to me smart. And I said, so you're trying to figure out which things are real and which ones aren't? And he went, yeah. And I said, did you hallucinate these before you got in the mental hospital? And he went, no. And I said to the doctor, I said, are you giving this guy drugs? And he said, well, I'm sure we're giving him some kind of drug. What kind of an attitude is that? He can reassure the guy there are no dead babies flying on hot dogs, but he's not sure what drugs they're giving him. He said, well, I can look it up. He said, I'm not in charge of Peter's case. And I said, well, are you in charge of the hot dogs? And he went, what? And I said, the floating hot dogs. Are you in charge of those? I said, there may not be dead babies on them, but there are hot dogs floating by, aren't there, Peter? And Peter went, yeah. And I said, by the way, can you see through those hot dogs? And he said, yeah. I said, then they're not real. And he went, huh? And I said, well, when you look at the baby in the hot dog, I said, it doesn't look like this chair. See the chair? You can't see through it at all, but you can see through the hot dog. His hallucinations are like that. You can kind of see through them. And he went, yeah. And I said, so when you see stuff and you can kind of see through it, it's just a hallucination. You're supposed to enjoy them. They're only there for entertainment. And Peter went, they scared the hell out of me. And I said, well, yes, so does a Ferris wheel, but you still go on them, don't you? And he went, I don't like Ferris wheels. I said, roller coasters? He said, oh, well, roller coasters are okay. And I said, yeah, but you go on it for a thrill. I said, the hot dogs and the dead babies are only there to entertain you. And he went, wow. And I said, by the way, I said, can you see a barber's pole? And he went, what? And I said, over here, can you see a barber's pole going around? He goes, yeah. I go, does it look like the wall? And he goes, well, no, I can kind of see through it. And I said, well, you can see through the window. And the window's there. And he goes, well, yeah, but that's different. And I said, you're right. It is different. Now, I discovered working with people, because one of the best cases I think I ever got of this was they took a woman out of a mental hospital in the Midwest, and they had called me up and they said that this woman was just nutty as a fruitcake, and they said that these two psychiatrists were willing to pay for my time, and they were willing to bring the woman to California if I would demonstrate actually working with a schizophrenic, you know, because they said that they absolutely did not believe that you could change a schizophrenic in any short period of time. Now, not only were these psychiatrists kind of dumb, because to me, if you don't believe that people can change, being a psychiatrist seems like the wrong profession. I didn't just to right off the top of my head, why that would be like being an auto mechanic that didn't believe cars could be repaired. You know, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. You know, but these people were highly paid professionals, right? But see, the thing is, since they didn't know how to do it, they assumed their job was to come up with excuses for why no one had done it, instead of going, no one's done it yet. So not only that, these guys were cheap. They didn't even fly out. They drove. They brought this woman in a big station wagon. This guy had a big country Squire. You know, his wife went out and bought this gigantic. There's a station wagon that's about from here to the wall. I mean, it's a big, giant American car. And they put a bed in the back, and they gave this woman drugs and had her sleep. And they took turns driving, and they drove straight out, flat out, all the way from Michigan to California. That's like 2,000 miles, right? And when they got there and they arrived, you know, and then they spent the night in a hotel, and they got, you know, refreshed and everything, and they had showers and new clothes. They even bought her an outfit so she wouldn't wear the little outfit they give you in the hospital. And they came and they took her down and got her hair done so she'd look nice, because I told them they had to do this. And when they came in, this woman sat down, and she was kind of uptight. And I think part of the reason is I told them they had to stop giving her all the serious psychiatric drugs, that they had to diminish the dosage. And then once the dosage was down very low, then they could bring her out. Because I don't like to work with people when they're on serious amounts of drugs. Because once you take them off the drugs, then the symptoms come back. And, you know, to me, I'd rather just do it. Now I've found out that if I just videotape it while I do it on drugs, then they can take them off the drugs and show them the videotape. Because people get lots of amnesia when they change drug prescriptions. And this is one of the reasons why alcoholics have blackouts. That, you know, once the alcohol is gone, they can't access the memory without going into a totally drunk state. You can usually get them to recover their memory, but when you do, they feel like they're totally drunk, because the memories are associated with being totally drunk. But anyway, this woman came in, and they sat down, and here are these two doctors, right? And the one guy set up a videotape machine. Now, in these days, videotape machines were not like they are now. They were reel-to-reel. They were huge motherfucking things. And the cameras were, you know, I mean, they were like these things, and it was called portable. And they set up this big giant camera and this big giant thing, and they had a battery pack that looked like it came out of the car. I mean, it was huge. And they set this thing down and all these wires and everything. And I asked them, I said, what's the videotape for? And they said, we want to document this. And I said, oh, you can't just watch and know it? And they said, oh, no. They said, you know, we're going to use this as a training film back when we get back to Michigan. And so I said, now, let me ask you the question. I said, to begin with, what is this woman doing in a mental hospital? And they said she's not in touch with reality. And I said, how do you know that? And they said, well, she's always claiming that she killed her parents. And she said, and her parents will be there, and they'll leave, and afterwards she'll say to us, she goes, did I kill my parents? And we'll say, your parents are in the next room. We'll bring her parents in and show her, and then when they leave the room, she'll say, did I kill my parents? And she said, she's obviously not in touch with reality. That, you know, that the things that should convince her of what's real and what's not real are out of order in her mind. So I asked the psychiatrist, I said, did you kill your parents? And you should have seen the look on his face. And he went, who told you that? And I said, that nobody told me that. I said, I'm asking you, have you killed your parents? And he said, no. He said, my parents aren't dead. And I said, okay. I said, now, what I want you to do is very simple. I want you to imagine killing your parents. Can you do that? And he went, well, I can imagine it even when I would never do it. I said, just imagine it. It's not going to hurt anything. And he went like that. And I said, now, you know that you didn't kill your parents. And you know the last time you saw them, they were still alive, right? And he went, yeah. And I said, now think about what you just visualized, what you just imagined. I said, did it really happen? And he went, of course not. I said, what's the difference between the pictures of seeing your parents alive and the pictures of having killed them that you know are not real? And he said, well, when you have fantasies, they have a black border around it. And so I turned to the schizophrenic and I said, did you know that? And she said, no. And I said, okay, let's go through it. The picture of killing your parents, put a black border around it. She said, okay. I said, now, how did you come here? And she said, we drove in the car. I said, I want you to imagine having flown here. Going to the airport, getting in a plane, flying here. And I said to her, I said, did you fly here? Or did you drive? She went, We flew, we drove, we flew, we drove. I said, you didn't put a black border around the flight. And she said, oh, you're right. She went, I said, now, did you fly or did you drive? And she went, we drove. And I said, did you kill your parents? And she said, no. And I said, now, what other things have you made up in your mind? And I put her into a trance. I said, I want your unconscious to go back through and take anything you fantasized and put a black border around it. Now, where did I get the solution? Out of the psychiatrist. He knew this all along, and yet he never shared it with his patients. Now, I'm sure there's lots of other ways to tell what you fantasize from what really happened, but you have to have a way of knowing which ones are which things are imagination and which ones aren't. As soon as you can tell them apart, then you're not going to be locked up, hopefully. Although people get locked up for other reasons. But see, to me, the psychiatrists made it all too difficult. They were rooting around in her childhood. They were giving her fucking serious drugs over an extended period of time. And I'll tell you, taking these kinds of drugs they give in mental hospitals over the years has wear and tear on you, not to mention the fact they tried to help her with electric shock treatment. They were talking about doing a frontal lobotomy. This is on somebody who just isn't sorting the pictures out in their head. There's no reason to knife somebody in the skull. No reason to electrocute somebody. No reason to incarcerate somebody. This is a function of education. And this, to me, on one side, is how serious what we're talking about is. But the fact that it's a serious outcome for a lot of people means we have to have our sense of humor so we don't get lost in it. We have to be able to think of how funny it is. This doctor knew the answer to the question, but he didn't ask the right questions of the right people. He was trying to find out what was wrong with her, and she's the only one that didn't know. The answer was in him. If he'd asked his buddy that was sitting there and he said, hey, you can tell the difference between what really happened and what didn't. How do you know the difference? And if the guy says, I don't know, you go, well, make something up. Okay, now, 2 minutes later, you know which one you made up, don't you? How do you know that? Well, some people have a memory of having made it up. Okay, so you go back and you go, now, remember, you made up the memory of having killed your parents. Okay, so if you have a memory of having made up the memory, or else it doesn't have a time and a place. But see, again, this whole thing with NLP and strategies, see, sometimes it's enough to elicit a strategy, but then the other thing is understand that these strategies all build machines. This poor young woman had a machine that kept track of memories of what really happened, but she also had a machine that made up fantasies. You know, and especially with being in a mental hospital, this is not the best place. Whosever idea it was to put these crazy people together so they could get a firm grip on reality. I mean, imagine, because that guy didn't just walk up to me and say, did you see a dead baby floating on a hot dog? He's saying this to everybody that's in there. So if you came in and you're this woman, imagine if this woman was on the same ward as this guy. She'd be sitting there and some guy would come up and go, did you just see a dead baby on a hot dog? And she'd go, and then she'd go run up and she'd go, there are dead babies on hot dogs. Right? And they'd say to her, now there isn't. Here, take some more of these. And by the way, if you keep seeing this, we're gonna shock you with electric shock treatment. All that does is get schizophrenics to lie to you because they don't want to be hurt either. They go, and then they do this. They go, I didn't see any dead babies on hot dogs. Not this morning at 10 o'clock and not at 11:30, and then not in the day ward or by the pool. You know, but this doesn't make it so that they're not scared, because the worst part for this woman was that what she was going through was frightening. But see, to me, it's no more frightening than the fact that you could literally predict 70,000 bad feelings in the next 20 years that now you guys don't have to have. That's very cool. Now, the same thing is true for what I want for her and what I expect you guys to do, whether you're school teachers, whether you do NLP, whether you're a hypnotist. I know we have some doctors in here. We have a chemist, and I'm not sure what he really does for a living now because he wouldn't tell us. But, you know, maybe he's out there making ecstasy. Who knows? I just hope he's not doing it in pill form, because it's so much easier to make ecstasy. See, here we are by the sea, and pretty soon this seminar is going to be an next. So the thing is when you can say, what did you do last weekend? You can go, ecstasy, Bodensee. See, to me, the thing is what this woman needed was a way of reassuring herself so she could get a firm grip on the reality that we're building. Because the truth is the future you're about to have when you leave here can be totally different. It takes a small amount of change, and as time goes by, it's going to influence more and more moments of your life. And you see, I consider my work not to be about repair, but to be about freedom. Somebody mentioned that the first day when I said, what does that feel like? And she said, I feel free. Well, that's how I think about my work. My job with this woman was to make it so she could be free from the mental hospital, but free from all that fear of not being able to know what really happened and what didn't really happen. And no amount of drugs is going to clear that up, by the way. Now, there are things that happen. Some people hallucinate because they have chemical imbalances. We tried an experiment, and I was not very popular for doing this, but I was in a very good position of authority, because the person that was paying the bills was a multi-fucking millionaire who supported a mental health facility. And he was very convinced because I had helped his son. And his son had some serious problems, and I got him out of them. And he said, what could I do for you? And I said, well, I'd like to try this experiment. I'd like to take some of the people that have really serious mental health problems, and I want to put them on dialysis. And he said, why would you want to do that? Do you think they have problems with their kidneys? And I said, no, I think they have bad chemicals in their body, and I want to find out what happens when we take them out. So we put some people, and we had a manic depressive, we had a paranoid schizophrenic, and then we had this guy who was just hallucinating all over the place. This guy was just nuts. I mean, this guy was a screaming, bang his head against the wall, flaming psychotic. And, you know, and they were convinced that they didn't drug the shit out of this guy, that, you know, he was going to hurt himself. And they were probably right, but I think drugging the shit out of him was hurting him too. And so when I had them take this guy off of the drugs that he was on, he started really getting wacky. And I mean, we had these two big black orderlies that held this guy down, and we put him on dialysis. And inside of 2 hours, dialysis usually takes longer than this. This guy got sane as a board, and so did the others. Because, you see, at one level, a lot of this stuff may be triggered consciously by the way you think about things, but it's going to weed its way down into your neurology, and then at the bottom line, it's going to affect your body chemistry. So we started trying an experiment. We started realizing that since this is the case, it doesn't matter where we start at. We could actually start people by doing body work on people and changing their diets. They don't have good food in mental hospitals, even the expensive mental hospitals. I worked in one in Connecticut, a very wealthy place. A private hospital cost a fortune to go be loony in there. Most of the people that were in there were committed to the hospital by a relative, and were wacky as the day was long. Most of them as a result of overdosing on alcohol for too long, and having relatives that were full of shit. A bad combination. But we found out that if we changed their food, and guess what? We didn't even change it in an organized fashion. We just kept changing it. We kept changing when they ate, we kept changing what they ate, and then we kept noticing what affected them positively. And it turned out it was different with different people. And so the chef had to do this horrible thing. He had to cook different food for different people. Can you imagine a chef having to do that? Because and he was objected to it. He said, look, I've always made the same thing for everyone here. And I said, isn't that boring? I said, you're a chef. Don't you want to cook different food all the time? Wouldn't it make more sense to give people what they feel like they want to eat? And I said, you could set this up more. I said, it's only a 90-bed hospital. Set it up like a restaurant. Every day you'll get to cook new things. Have a menu. Let them choose. You know, use different spices. You know, I mean, because if you begin to get into ruts, any rut, after a while, is going to produce an overdose. It's just that simple. I'll tell you a funny thing. That my doctor in California, who's a very, very good guy, the doctor I have now, I went through some bad ones. I had to kiss a lot of princes before I found a frog. I'll tell you. Some of these pompous asses thought they knew everything, but they just couldn't help us. And my wife had this terrible disease, and I didn't. We finally, it's Lenny's brother, actually, the woman in here that's putting on the workshop with Lenny. His brother is a doctor. He's a Seventh-day Adventist. I am a little leery about religions in general. But this guy got a calling to be a doctor. He was a wealthy businessman, decided to be a doctor, gave up all of that stuff, and went back and works at the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital. He teaches there. But I've never had anybody be so thorough. He took blood scans on everything. And he found stuff with my wife that they had missed at every other place. They said she had no infections, and he found 3 different things, you know, that she had that, you know, and one of them he said you could only get from a hospital. So they actually ended up giving her one that she didn't have. And with me, he went through and he, you know, because I actually brought her there, and then he looked at me and he said, you know, I think you need help too. and I said, I don't care if I live or die as long as I can get my wife to be better. And he said, well, as long as you're here, can we have some blood, please? You know, and I said, sure, I'll give you all the blood you want. I said, I wouldn't recommend you give it to anyone, though. It's filled with all kinds of stuff. But he did tests on my body chemistry, and then he told me, he said, one of the reasons I was having problems was that I had a chemical imbalance. And he gave me something which adjusted for it, and it changed the way I felt a lot. And so sometimes, because now modern day psychiatrists should be worried about people's body chemistry. I found out that by putting people on dialysis and zeroing them out, that was the time at which I could really have a great impact on them. Because at that point, if I gave them new mental ways of thinking about things, so instead of spending 70, and in their case, 700,000 moments a day feeling bad, I gave them a machine which would produce certainty. Because you need to have certainty. See, to me, the thing about the woman that came up on the stage, turned around, spinning the feeling, and talked, now, at that point in time, the best thing is she's convinced this is no longer going to be hard. So when she leaves here and goes out into the world, when she thinks about talking to an audience, it's no longer going to be something that creates uncertainty and doubt and fear. It's going to be something that creates opportunity. She's going to start asking, what can I do to make it fun? How can I get people interested? What shall I talk about? Rather than what mistakes can I make? What can go wrong? What if I'm unprepared? What if everybody laughs at me? What if I keel over dead on the stage? Oh, no, God help me. See, I mean, this stuff gets out of hand. And see, if instead you build a machine that serves the purpose that it should, the guy didn't need to hallucinate hot dogs. Who cares why he was? You know, I'm sure a Freudian would go wacky with that. Hot dogs, aha, big penises, you know. And, you know, but yet thinking that hot dogs or penises are not going to do you much good because they're totally different, you know. Excuse me, you know, my penis is not a hot dog. I don't serve it with mustard, and I don't put it on a bun. And there are no dead babies riding around on it either. I mean, to think about it that way has got to seem silly. You know, this is the year 2001. It's time for us to evolve knowledge so that it becomes more practical, not more esoteric. I didn't design neuro-linguistic programming so that it would become something which was harder to understand. Quite the contrary. It's become something that's easier to understand. You shouldn't have to educate people in visual and kinesthetics and strategies. You just stick them in. You just say, put a black fucking border around this and do it every time. And when you bring them back, the ones with the black borders aren't real and this one is. So that people can sort things out. The same thing is true for yourself. You have the best guide of all. We've spent days here first spinning good feelings. Then we went and made ourselves some new feelings. Then we decided where to use those new feelings. Then we used the new feelings on somebody else to change their feelings. And then we went one step further. We said, okay, now we can stick new feelings in people, so now we're ready. So what did we do? We went and took out old feelings and made them so we created a void. Then we took new feelings feelings and stuck them in where the void was, and then we designed a direction for people to go in, i.e., that's the package. That was the plan. The plan was to give you all the pieces you would need so that not to do things rigidly. There's no set formula. I don't care which techniques you use. This is the thing you need to do. First, you need to put yourself in a really good state, right? Once you're in a really good state, then you need to put yourself in even a better state so that you're constantly headed in the direction of being more vibrant, more energetic, more assertive, all the things you want to be. Then when clients walk in, then you realize this is what they need. So what you do, you take all of these horrible problems they have and you dissolve them because they're not that much of a problem. They can't feel bad if they do the same thing that you're doing. If they do the same thing they've been doing, then they'll feel bad the same way. But if you change the voices, change the picture, and change the feelings, they don't stand a chance. You spin the feelings in an opposite direction, you put the movies in backwards, you make the sounds so they're on the opposite side of their head and in good tonality, and you're bound to have them feel different. Then what you do is you spin it so it aims towards their future, and you put them into altered states and start giving them good post-hypnotic suggestions. Because the only reason they do this is because it's what they've learned so far. But just like the schizophrenic that was in the hospital, she never went back in. She wasn't frightened anymore. In fact, I taught her to drive. And she drove back. But then I have immense amounts of courage. I'm not afraid of much of anything. And I used his car. Well, I lived out in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and I went to the store, and I asked her if she wanted to go with me. And the doctor said, what should we do? And I said, walk around in the hills, enjoy yourself, go look at the redwoods. And they went, which trees are redwoods? And I said, the red ones. So they went off looking for red trees. And redwoods are actually brown, but they told me they looked everywhere and they couldn't find any red trees. And I went, that's good. Go back to the hospital. And to put a black border around it. But see, with her, I wanted her to realize that not only could she think differently, she could do something she'd always believed was impossible. She always believed she could never drive because she didn't believe she could get out of the hospital and survive. She went, without the doctors and without the hospital, I'd be too frightened. But you see, she was frightened because she couldn't tell what was real from what really happened. She couldn't tell her imagination from the real experiences. And you see, both of them are good, but you have to know which one is which. You need to be able to fantasize possibilities and then go test out which things you're really going to do so that you can find out what fits with you from your past to your future. Once you associate these things together, it all becomes so much more simpler. Now, I tell you what, I want you to sit back, close your eyes, and put your feet on the floor. We got one last trance to try and get an idea in. And I don't want to miss it. Because we've spent 3 days here, and I believe it's been quite a days. That most of you have been in altered states and in and out in altered states and talking to yourself and considering things. Some of you took notes about things, and some of you dreamed dreams while you were at night, and some of you worried about this and worried about that. But I'll tell you, in the end, the important part of what you've done here is this sequence of activities. I sequence the activities to train your unconscious so that you could begin to build a new direction. So that if you close your eyes for a minute and think about how much you've relaxed. Just because you guys don't look like the same group that got here. You guys were a little fucking tense. And some of you were seriously German. And I don't care whether you came from Switzerland, England, or not. You all had that tight look on your face, like. And if you instead close your eyes, take a deep breath, and go inside. Only this time, just take a good feeling and spin it for no reason and just relax. Because you're going to do something that's not the end of this workshop, but the beginning of everything that happens afterwards. Because while you've been here listening to what I've said consciously, I'm a bit of a hypnotist. And sometimes I do some things overtly and some things covertly. But the plan is all the same. I want you to begin to feel better about everything you do. And I want you to do better things. It creates a vicious cycle of overwhelming pleasantness. I want it to become easier to say the things you think and feel, because if you don't like the way they sound, you can always change it. You can change the tone of the voice inside your head, and you can change the way you sound on the outside. You can speed up the tempo of your voice, or you can slow it down. And you can find what creates a sense of certainty, a sense of security in the knowledge that your own future, because what we've done is to line things up. I wanted to line up your conscious activity and your unconscious activity so that you engaged in mental tasks that made it so that they would work together in yourself and the other people that you work with. To me, the important part of my work is that I know this is what creates freedom. When you don't fight with yourself, but instead aim yourself, so that instead of going ready, fire, aim, it's ready, aim, fire, so that you begin to launch yourself compulsively towards a direction of becoming smarter, smoother, happier, easier, friendlier, more competent, more successful, wealthier, each and every day that goes by paying attention to the outside, by listening, by realizing all the extra noise in the feelings in your body, the noise and the voices in your head, pictures flopping around that you don't need. You don't need to make pictures of yourself failing. You got to learn to slow that stuff down and put it aside. This is done by leading with your feelings. Somebody once said to me, they said, lead with your heart and everything else will follow. And I understand this, but I think it's more than your heart. You have to lead with your spirit and with your body in the direction that you want to go. And when you get feelings moving in the right direction and you line the pictures up with them, you line the voices up so they're all going where you want to go, everything becomes easier. In fact, for some reason, it spins fast enough, it becomes quiet and still, where you just begin to move towards pleasure, it'll educate your intuitions. You guys are going to find that delightfully you're going to surprise yourself. Because in the days and the weeks and the months ahead, you're going to begin to find yourself doing new things in a new way. It's going to become an instinct to do things the easier way. If things get hard, it's like, going to occur to you. Perhaps you're going about it the wrong way. So just try it the opposite way. If you're looking for an answer, you can't find it, look in someone else. Someone who's already succeeding. If you can't find someone succeeding, then at least start thinking randomly in new ways. Because if what you're doing doesn't work, the more you do it, the more it won't. On the other hand, if now, having gone through and succeeded at just a few things to make yourself feel better, if you realize the parameters of how many more moments can feel wonderful, that every year you're alive, it multiplies geometrically. And if you even go through and clean up more, because tonight while you sleep and dream, in fact, each night after you leave here, I want to make sure that each and every one of you remembers not to forget anything other than the limitations, the bad feelings, any stress of a day, so that as you begin to sleep, your unconscious kicks in and opens up the post-hypnotic suggestion that begins to search for an easier way, for a more comfortable way, and begins to make it so that life is more exciting, more vibrant, and all of the things that seemed hard are going to start to get easy. Because as you begin to spin more and more good feelings inside yourself, suddenly you're going to find that all kinds of delightful things come your way. Serendipity will become afoot. You're suddenly going to discover when you think about things, you find books about it. That when you want to meet people, they show up. It's uncanny to the degree to which this can occur. Never underestimate the power of the human will. Not willpower, not forcing yourself to do things, but opening yourself up to the possibility that life, happiness, lust, orgasms, mugasms, spiritual gasms, all are things that are much easier than we make them. And that if we begin to line up our conscious and our unconscious resources and start out feeling good and then move to greater and greater states of pleasure, everything is going to become more wonderful more of the time. Speaking of time, now it's time to slowly open your eyes and remember to take the learnings and the understandings of the Bowden Sea everywhere that you go. They don't need them here. They do need something, but they don't need that. So that everything that you've gotten here will be something that you remember, even the parts that you didn't know you were getting. And I'll see you guys again soon. Thank you very much.